My mother smiled like she was admiring a mural. "Your sister's housewarming party was so lovely," she said. "When are you going to catch up?" I did not get angry. I woke up. I set my fork down and delivered an answer that made my sister's wineglass freeze in midair. They did not realize that this time, the favor was not just cash, it was a dark secret that had quietly stolen my name on bank paperwork. My name is Ruby Jenkins, and I was 34 years old the night I finally stopped apologizing for existing in a way that did not suit my mother's interior design preferences. It happened on a Tuesday, of all days, inside the kind of restaurant where the menus do not list prices and the waiters move with the silent, terrifying efficiency of assassins. We were in Columbus, Ohio, specifically in that pocket of the city where new money tries very hard to look like old money and usually just ends up looking beige. My mother, Elaine, had chosen the venue. Of course she had. It was my sister Marin's birthday, but Elaine treated Marin's milestones as her own personal performance reviews. The restaurant was a cavern of white tablecloths, low amber lighting, and so many mirrors on the walls that you could not chew a piece of steak without witnessing your own jaw muscles working from 3 different angles. It was designed to make you feel watched. It was the perfect habitat for my mother. I sat next to my husband, Evan. His hand was resting on my knee under the heavy drape of the linen cloth, a warm, solid anchor in a sea of performative family joy. Across from us sat Marin and her husband, Tyler, and at the head of the table, commanding the airspace like an air traffic controller directing flights into a storm, was Elaine. My stepfather, Ron, sat on her right, looking as he always did, neutral, beige, and entirely complicit in his silence. Marin looked perfect. It was a brittle, sharp kind of perfection that made my teeth ache just looking at her. She was wearing a dress the color of champagne that probably cost more than my first car, and her blonde hair was swept up in a chignon so tight I wondered if it was pulling her eyebrows up, giving her a permanent expression of surprised superiority. She smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It stopped at her mouth, practiced and frozen, like she was posing for a photo that no one was taking. "The halibut is divine," Marin said, picking at a piece of fish the size of a matchbook. "Tyler and I had it when we were in the Hamptons last summer. Do you remember, Ty?" Tyler nodded, looking tired. "Yeah, great fish. Though nothing beats the kitchen in the new house," Elaine interjected, steering the conversation back to the only topic that had mattered for the last 2 hours. "I was telling the girls at the club, Marin, that your quartz countertops are the exact shade of marble I saw in a magazine from Milan. Just exquisite." "It really is coming together," Marin agreed, her voice pitching up a little. "We finally got the landscaping done in the back. The homeowners association is very strict. You know, they only allow native species. It keeps the property values up." "Smart," Ron grunted, cutting his steak. "Keeps the riffraff out." I took a sip of my water. It was room temperature, just how Elaine insisted water should be served for digestion, though I suspected she just hated the sound of ice clinking because it interrupted her monologues. For 90 minutes, I had listened, I had nodded, I had made the appropriate noises of awe regarding Marin's square footage, the school district rating, the pedigree of her neighbors, and the specific brand of range hood she had installed. Not once, not a single time since we had sat down at 7 in the evening had anyone asked me how I was. They knew I had been promoted 3 months ago. They knew, vaguely, that Evan and I had moved. But to ask would be to open a door they preferred to keep shut. If they asked, they might have to hear an answer that didn't fit the script. In the script, Marin was the star, the golden child who married the investment banker and bought the big house in the right zip code. I was the supporting character, the one who was supposed to be a little bit messy, a little bit behind, so that Marin's shine seemed brighter by comparison. Evan squeezed my knee. He knew. He always knew. He was the only person at this table who saw me in high definition, while everyone else seemed to view me through a layer of gauze. "Ruby," Elaine said suddenly. I looked up. The waiter was clearing the plates, the china scraping softly against the silence. My mother was holding her wineglass by the stem, swirling the deep red liquid. She was looking at me, but her eyes were glazed over with that peculiar mix of pity and judgment she had perfected since I was 6 years old. "Yes, Mom," I asked. "I was just thinking," she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that usually preceded a verbal slap. "Marin's housewarming party was so lovely. The charcuterie board alone must have cost $500. And the flowers? It was just proper. It was how things should be done." I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. I knew where this was going. I had walked into this trap 1,000 times before. Usually, I would smile, apologize for my inadequacies, and promise to try harder. I would play the role of the disappointment so she could play the role of the benevolent matriarch. "It was a nice party," I said neutrally. Elaine sighed. A long, theatrical exhale. She set her glass down. "It's just that, well, look at you two." She gestured vaguely between me and Evan. "You are 34, Ruby. Marin is only 2 years older. When are you going to catch up?" The table went quiet. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the vacuum of space. Tyler looked down at his lap. Ron chewed his steak slower. Marin took a sudden interest in her manicure, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth, not out of malice, perhaps, but out of relief that the spotlight of criticism wasn't on her. "Catch up," I repeated. My voice was steady, which surprised me. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were still. "You know what I mean," Elaine said, leaning in. "A real home, a place you can invite people to. I know you and Evan bought that little place in Westerville, and that's fine, for a starter. But when are you going to have a real life like Marin? I worry about you. Ruby, I just want you to experience the joy of hosting a beautiful event, of being proud of where you live." The waiter arrived with the dessert menu. Sensing the tension and hovering uncertainly, I waved him away without looking. Something inside me snapped, but it wasn't a loud snap. It was the sound of a heavy lock clicking open. It was the realization that I was sitting at a table with people who shared my DNA, but none of my reality. I looked at the white tablecloth. I looked at the candlelight reflecting in the polished silver fork. I realized I didn't want their approval. I didn't even want their understanding. I just wanted out of the game. I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly into a square, and placed it on the table. "I am proud of where I live," I said. Elaine laughed. A light, tinkling sound. "Oh, honey, I'm sure you are. But we're talking about a certain standard. A housewarming is a statement. It tells the world you've arrived. Marin has arrived. I just want to know when I can expect the same from you. When are we going to celebrate you?" I looked at Evan. He gave me a tiny nod, a permission slip. I turned back to my mother. "I have already celebrated." Elaine blinked. The smile faltered. Just a fraction. "What?" I said. "I have already celebrated," I said, my voice clear and cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "We had our housewarming party last year, in October. It was beautiful. We had 30 people in the backyard. We made pizzas in the outdoor oven Evan built. We drank wine until 2 in the morning. It was the best night of my life." The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to choke on. Marin's glass of Pinot Noir stopped halfway to her mouth. Ron stopped chewing entirely. Elaine stared at me. Her face went through a complex series of contortions, confusion, disbelief, and finally, the sharp, jagged edge of offense. "You what?" she whispered. "You had a housewarming party." "Yes," I said. "But—" She looked around the table, as if searching for a cue card that would explain this deviation from the script. "But I didn't know about it." "Why didn't I know about it? How could you have a party and not tell me?" She looked at me with genuine hurt, the kind of hurt a narcissist feels when they realize the world has continued spinning without their permission. "Ruby, how could you? I'm your mother. Why wasn't I there?" I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. For the first time in 34 years, I did not feel the urge to lie to protect her feelings. "Because, Mom," I said softly. You weren't on the list. You could hear a pin drop. Actually, somewhere across the restaurant, a waiter dropped a fork, and the clatter sounded like a gunshot. Elaine's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked as if I had just reached across the table and slapped her. Marin let out a small, strangled gasp. Tyler looked from me to Elaine with wide, terrified eyes. "Excuse me," Elaine finally choked out. Her voice was trembling. "I wasn't on the list." "No," I said. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip. It tasted better now. We invited people who support us, people who are happy for us without conditions, people who don't treat our home like a competition venue. It was a lovely evening. You wouldn't have enjoyed it. There were no white tablecloths, and nobody compared the countertops to a magazine in Milan. "That is cruel," Marin hissed, finding her voice. "Ruby, that is incredibly cruel. Mom has done everything for us." "Has she?" I asked, shifting my gaze to my sister. "Or has she done everything for the image of us? There's a difference. Marin, and frankly, I'm tired of paying the admission fee for a show I never wanted to be in." Elaine's eyes welled up with tears, real tears. Or at least, the weaponized tears she kept in reserve for moments when she lost control. "I can't believe this," she sobbed, grabbing a napkin to dab at her eyes carefully, so as not to smudge her mascara. "I try so hard. I just want the best for you. And you exclude me, your own mother." "I didn't exclude you to hurt you," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I excluded you because I wanted to be happy, and I realized those two things cannot coexist in the same room." Ron cleared his throat. It was a rumbling, dusty sound. "Now, Ruby," he said, his voice low and warning. "That's enough. It's your sister's birthday. Let's not ruin the night." "I'm not ruining anything, Ron," I said. "I'm answering a question. Mom asked when I was going to catch up. I'm telling her I'm not running the same race. I'm not even on the same track." I signaled the waiter for the check. But then I remembered where I was. In Elaine's world, the matriarch pays, because money is control. "Actually," I said, standing up, "Evan and I are going to head out. Happy birthday. Marin, the house sounds expensive." "You're leaving?" Elaine gasped. "Before the cake." "I think I've had my fill," I said. I grabbed my purse. Evan stood up with me, his hand finding the small of my back. I felt a rush of adrenaline, cold and sharp. I had done it. I had broken the cardinal rule of the Jenkins-Caldwell family. I had gone off script. But as I looked at them, Elaine weeping into her napkin while checking her reflection in the spoon, Marin looking furious that her birthday had been hijacked by my rebellion, and Ron looking at the menu as if hoping to find an escape route. I realized something else. They weren't just angry. They were scared. They were scared because I was the one who held the unspoken tension of the family together. I was the sponge that absorbed the toxicity so Marin could stay clean. If I walked away, who would they project their insecurities onto? Who would be the failure so they could feel like successes? "Good night," I said. We walked away from the table. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the whispers starting before we even reached the coat check. But for the first time, I didn't care. However, as we stepped out into the cool Ohio night, the valet bringing our car around, I didn't know that my Declaration of Independence had triggered something far more dangerous than a family argument. I thought I was just setting a boundary. I didn't know that by refusing to play their game, I had forced them to change the rules. And the new rules would not be played with snide comments over dinner. They would be played with signatures, social security numbers, and a desperation that money couldn't fix. Evan opened the car door for me. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. I'm better than fine. I looked back at the restaurant window. I could see the silhouette of my family, a tableau of dysfunction framed in expensive light. "They're going to come for you," Evan said quietly as he got in the driver's side. "You know that, right? Elaine won't let that stand." "Let her try," I said. If I had known what trying looked like for them, I might have driven straight to the police station that night, but I was high on the fumes of my own bravery. I didn't see the shadow stretching out from that white tablecloth, reaching for my wallet, reaching for my name. I watched the city lights blur as we drove onto the highway, heading toward Westerville, toward my home, the home they hadn't been invited to. I thought the worst part was over. I thought the hard part was saying the words. I was wrong. The dinner was just the appetizer. The main course was coming, and it was going to cost me a lot more than the price of a steak. To understand why I put a fork down on a white tablecloth in Columbus and declared war, you have to understand the architecture of the house I grew up in. I do not mean the physical bricks and mortar, though those were always immaculately maintained. I mean the invisible scaffolding that held us in place. In the Jenkins-Caldwell household, affection was not a renewable resource. It was a pie of fixed size, and every slice Marin took was one that I did not get. From the time we were old enough to be introduced to strangers, the script was written. Marin was the child for the mantelpiece. I was the child for the hallway. Marin was described with words like vibrant, promising, and sparkling. I was described with words that sounded like apologies. I was steady. I was quiet. I was a late bloomer. My mother, Elaine, used the phrase needs time to describe me so often that for years I thought it was a medical diagnosis. My biological father left when I was 3 and Marin was 5. I have no real memory of him, just a vague sense of a door closing too hard. Elaine did not mourn the marriage. She curated the recovery. She rebuilt our lives with the same aggressive precision she used to organize her spice rack. Enter Ron Hargrove. Ron came into our lives when I was 7. He was a man made of beige cardigans and non-committal hums. He was a regional manager for a logistics firm, which fit him perfectly because he managed the logistics of our family emotional state by simply refusing to participate in it. He was neutral. In international politics, neutrality can be a virtue. In a family where one person is consuming all the oxygen, neutrality is an act of violence. It means watching someone drown and saying you do not wish to get wet. Dinner time was the daily liturgy where this hierarchy was reinforced. We would sit at the round oak table, and the spotlight would swing immediately to Marin. "Tell Ron about your solo," Elaine would say, beaming before Marin had even opened her mouth, and Marin would perform. She would talk about choir practice, or the lead role she secured in the school play, or how the math teacher singled her out for praise. Her stories were full of color and light, mostly because Elaine edited them in real time, smoothing over the rough edges. If Marin failed a test, it was because the teacher was incompetent. If Marin fought with a friend, it was because the friend was jealous. Marin was never the agent of her own misfortune. She was always the protagonist of a heroic struggle. When the monologue concluded, Ron would nod and say something safe like, "Sounds like you are on the right track, kiddo." Then, the silence would stretch toward me. Elaine would cut a piece of chicken, look at me briefly, and ask, "And how was school, Ruby?" "Fine," I would say. "I got an A on my history paper." "That is nice," Elaine would reply, already looking back at Marin. "Marin, we need to look at getting those braces off before the spring formal. We cannot have you smiling with metal in the pictures." That was it. My A in history died between the salad bowl and the salt shaker. It did not fit the narrative. My successes were inconvenient because they required Elaine to divide her attention, and she simply did not have the bandwidth. I learned very quickly that the only way to survive was to become small. I compacted myself. I learned to occupy the negative space in the room. If Marin was the noise, I was the silence. If Marin was the sun, I was the shadow that proved the light existed. By the time I was 16, I had stopped bringing my report cards to the dinner table. I got a job at a used bookstore downtown. I did not tell them because I knew what Elaine would say. She would ask why I was wasting my time surrounded by dust when I could be doing something that looked better on a college application, like volunteering at the hospital where the wealthy donors would see me. But I loved that job. I loved the smell of old paper and the quiet customers who judged books by their content, not their covers. I earned $7.50 an hour. The first time I held a paycheck with my name on it, I felt a rush of power that was almost dizzying. It was mine. Elaine had not negotiated it. Marin had not overshadowed it. Ron had not ignored it. It was a direct transaction between my effort and the world. I started saving. I opened a bank account without telling them, riding my bike to the branch on a Saturday morning. That little passbook became my diary. The numbers in the balance column were the only validation I had. They told me I was capable. They told me I could survive without an audience. Marin, meanwhile, was learning a very different lesson. She was learning that gravity did not apply to her. When Marin crashed her first car into a neighbor's mailbox, Elaine was on the phone with the insurance company before the engine had cooled, spinning a story about a stray dog running into the road. Marin never paid a dime. She never apologized to the neighbor. She just waited for the world to reshape itself around her mistake. When Marin dropped out of her first semester of college because she was overwhelmed, Ron drove 6 hours to pick her up, loading her boxes into his truck without a word of complaint. They framed it as a strategic gap year. When I worked 2 jobs to pay for my tuition at the state university because Elaine said the college fund was tapped out after Marin's private school tuition, nobody called it strategic. They just called it Ruby being Ruby. "You are so strong," Elaine would say, dismissing my exhaustion with a wave of her hand. "You are the sturdy one. Marin is sensitive. She feels things more deeply than you do." She did not mean I was strong. She meant I was convenient. Being sturdy meant I did not require maintenance. It meant they could pile the emotional lumber of the family on my back and trust that I would not collapse and embarrass them at the country club. Ron had a favorite saying that he deployed whenever the cracks in our family veneer started to show. "Family comes first," he would declare, usually while watching football. But I learned that family was a code word for Elaine's feelings and Marin's comfort. One winter during my junior year of college, my car broke down on the highway in a snowstorm. It was 2 a.m. I was 20 years old, freezing, and terrified. I called home. Ron answered. I explained where I was. I asked if he could come get me. There was a long pause on the line. "The roads are pretty bad. Ruby," he said, "and your mother finally got to sleep. If I start the car, the garage door opener will wake her up, and she has a migraine." I stood on the side of the highway, snow whipping against my face, holding the phone against my ear. "So you are not coming." "Call a tow truck," Ron said. "Do you have a family is important, Ruby, but we have to be practical. Be safe." He hung up. I sat in my freezing car for 2 hours waiting for a tow truck I could barely afford. That night, shivering under a thin blanket, I realized the truth. I was an accessory to this family. I was the extra chair brought in from the garage when guests arrived. I stopped sharing my life with them completely after that. I did not tell them when I got promoted to shift supervisor. I did not tell them when I started dating a guy from my statistics class who broke my heart. I did not tell them when I won an internship at a major financial firm. Why give them the chance to diminish it? Why hand them a diamond just so they could tell me it looked like glass? I lived by a strict rule. Do not make them change their mind about you. If they think you are the quiet, mediocre daughter, let them think it. It is safer to be underestimated than to be targeted. If I showed them I was successful, I risked triggering Elaine's competitive instinct. If I shined too bright, she would find a way to dim me so Marin could see better. So I played the part. I wore plain clothes to family gatherings. I nodded when Marin bragged about her entry-level job in public relations as if she were running the United Nations. I let them believe I was just scraping by. And then I met Evan. We met in the most unglamorous way possible. We were both waiting in line at the county clerk's office to renew our vehicle tags. The line was long, the air conditioning was broken, and the fluorescent lights were humming with a headache-inducing frequency. He turned to me, wiped sweat from his forehead, and said, "I feel like we are in purgatory, but without the hope of salvation." I laughed. It was a real laugh, loud and unpolished. Evan was different. He was an architect, but not the kind who wears black turtlenecks and critiques the angle of your spoon. He was a man who looked at a crumbling wall and saw the potential for a window. On our third date, we sat in a diner eating pancakes at 8 in the evening. I found myself doing something I never did. I talked. I told him about the bookstore. I told him about the internship. I told him about the snowstorm and Ron's refusal to wake up the garage door. I waited for the pity. I waited for him to ask why I didn't try harder to win their love. I waited for him to ask when I was going to fix my relationship with them. Instead, Evan put his fork down. He looked at me with a serious, intense expression. "You built yourself," he said. "Do you realize how rare that is? You didn't get handed a life, Ruby. You forged it. You are the most impressive person I've ever met." I froze. "But I am not Maren. I am not the one who shines." "Maren is a mirror," Evan said, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "She just reflects whatever light is pointed at her. You are the fire. You generate your own light." It was the first time anyone had ever described me as a source of anything. Evan didn't ask me when I was going to catch up. He didn't ask when I was going to arrive. As far as he was concerned, I was already there. He loved the version of me that existed on a Tuesday night in sweatpants. He loved the version of me that budgeted carefully and checked the tire pressure on the car. When he proposed, 2 years later, he did it in our small apartment kitchen while we were making pasta. There was no photographer. There was no audience. It was just us. "I want to build a house with you," he said. "Not a showpiece, a home." When I told Elaine I was engaged, her first question was not, "Is he kind?" or "Do you love him?" Her first question was, "What does his father do?" "He is a retired teacher," I said. "Oh," Elaine said, the word deflating like a punctured balloon. "Well, that is nice. We will have to keep the guest list manageable then." She was already calculating how to minimize the embarrassment of a middle-class wedding, but for the first time, her disappointment didn't sting. It just bounced off me. I looked at Evan across the room, and I knew. I had stepped out of the hierarchy. I had my own gravity now. But what I failed to understand was that people like Elaine and Maren do not like it when a satellite leaves their orbit. They do not view it as independence. They view it as theft. By removing myself and my future resources from their control, I had created a deficit in their ledger. And in the Jenkins-Caldwell family, deficits were not allowed. Someone always had to pay. I thought I was free because I had stopped seeking their approval. I did not realize that their need for me had nothing to do with love and everything to do with leverage. I was the safety net they didn't know they needed until they started to fall. The years went by. Maren married Tyler, a man with a heavy watch and a heavier mortgage. They bought the house. They played the game. I watched from a distance, relieved to be a spectator. But resentment is a slow poison. It builds up in the groundwater of a family until the soil itself becomes toxic. Elaine watched me be happy in my small, quiet life, and it bothered her. It bothered her that she couldn't take credit for it. It bothered her that she couldn't critique it because I didn't show it to her. So when she asked me at that dinner table in Columbus, "When are you going to catch up?" she wasn't asking about my house. She was asking when I was going to come back down to my assigned place at the bottom of the ladder, so she could feel tall again. I didn't know it then, sitting in the silence of my own history. But by refusing to be small, I had made myself a target, and my mother, the curator of the perfect life, was about to prove that she would burn my reality to the ground just to keep her picture frame intact. The house Evan and I bought in Westerville was not the kind of property that would ever appear in a glossy architectural digest. It did not have a 2-story foyer that echoed when you walked through it, and it certainly did not have a waterfall island in the kitchen made of stone quarried from a specific mountain in Tuscany. It was a 1970s colonial with good bones, a front porch that caught the morning sun, and a backyard that smelled of damp earth and possibility. We closed on the house on a Tuesday in September. I remember the moment we unlocked the front door for the first time. The silence inside was not heavy or expectant. It was welcoming. The floors creaked slightly in the hallway, a sound that Elaine would have immediately marked for repair. But to me, it sounded like the house was exhaling. My life with Evan was built on these small, tactile realities. We spent our weekends not at country clubs or galas, but at the local nursery, arguing playfully over which variety of tomato would survive the Ohio summer. We planted a herb garden just off the kitchen basil, rosemary, thyme, and mint that threatened to take over the entire plot. When I cooked, I did not worry about presentation, I worried about flavor. Our kitchen was often messy, smelling of garlic and brewing coffee, with flour dusted on the counter like a light snowfall. It was a space designed for living, not for being looked at. This groundedness extended to my professional life as well. I worked as a compliance manager at Luminark Financial, a fintech company that specialized in streamlining small business loans. My job was the antithesis of my family's dynamic. At Luminark, feelings did not matter, intentions did not matter. The only things that mattered were the numbers, the regulations, and the paper trail. I spent my days hunting for discrepancies, verifying identities, and ensuring that the story the data told was the truth. I loved the binary nature of it. A document was either valid or it was not. A signature was either authentic or it was a forgery. There was no room for gaslighting in a spreadsheet. When we decided to host our housewarming party the previous October, the decision not to invite my mother and sister was not made out of malice. It was made out of a desperate need for oxygen. I knew exactly how that party would go if they were on the guest list. Elaine would walk in and immediately scan the room for flaws. She would run a finger over the doorframe to check for dust. She would ask, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, why we had chosen that shade of blue for the living room when Eggshell would have opened up the space. Marin would stand in the corner, clutching her designer bag like a shield, making sure everyone knew that her house in the new development had 12-foot ceilings while ours only had 8. They would turn my sanctuary into a stage, and I would be demoted to a stagehand in my own home. So, we simply did not tell them. The party was chaotic and wonderful. We invited about 20 people friends from Evan's architecture firm, my colleagues from the compliance department, and a few neighbors who had brought us cookies when we moved in. There was no dress code, there was no catering staff. Evan built a fire in the backyard pit, and we ordered 15 pizzas from the best dive spot in town. I remember standing in my kitchen at 10 in the evening, watching my friend Sarah laugh so hard that wine spilled onto her shirt. In my mother's house, a wine spill was a crisis. It required immediate intervention, stain remover, and a lecture on clumsiness. In my house, Sarah just wiped it off with a paper towel and kept laughing. The air in the room felt light. No one was measuring me. No one was waiting for me to fail. For the first time in my life, I was hosting an event where I did not feel the need to hold my breath. But happiness in the Jenkins-Caldwell family is a contraband item. If you are happy without their permission, you are hiding something. A few weeks after the party, the inquiries began. They were subtle at first, like water seeping under a doorframe. Elaine called me on a Sunday afternoon. I was repotting a fern on the back deck, my hands covered in dark soil. "So," she said, her voice breezy, but with an undercurrent of steel. "I heard from Aunt Linda that you moved. Westerville," she said. I paused, shaking the dirt from my trowel. Aunt Linda was the family gossip, a woman who could extract information from a stone. "Yes, Mom, we moved in September." "Oh," Elaine said. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. "Westerville, that is quaint. Is it near the highway? I always worry about the noise pollution in those older subdivisions." "It is very quiet, Mom," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "We like it." "And the square footage?" she asked. I only ask because Marin was looking at the market trends, and she said the resale value in that area has plateaued. You have to be careful, Ruby. You do not want to sink money into a sinking ship. "We are happy with the investment," I said. My voice was flat. I was practicing a technique my therapist called gray rocking, making myself as uninteresting and unresponsive as a gray rock so the narcissist would lose interest. "Well," she sighed, "I suppose as long as it is enough for you. Not everyone needs a grand entrance. Did you get a good rate? Ron knows a broker who could have helped you. You really should have called us. We could have saved you from making mistakes." "We handled it," I said. How is Marin? Stressed, Elaine said immediately, shifting gears to her favorite topic. The decorators are so slow. She's trying to get the dining room ready for a photo shoot with a local lifestyle blog. The pressure is immense. Ruby, you are lucky you do not have those kinds of expectations on you. I ended the call 10 minutes later, feeling drained but victorious. I had not given her the address. I had not invited her over. I had kept the drawbridge up. But Marin was a different kind of investigator. If Elaine was a battering ram, Marin was a drone, hovering silently and taking pictures. Her texts started coming late at night. Marin had always been an insomniac, fueled by anxiety and the fear that someone, somewhere, was having a better time than she was. Hey, her message read at 11:30 on a Tuesday. Mom said you bought a place. Send pics. I looked at the phone glowing in the dark. Evan was asleep beside me, his breathing rhythmic and peaceful. I debated not answering, but I knew silence would be interpreted as hostility. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and took a photo of the stove. It was dark, and the image was grainy. I hit send. Nice, Marin replied instantly. Is that gas or electric? Tyler insisted on the Wolf dual fuel range for us. It was $6,000, but totally worth it for the resale value. She wasn't asking about my stove. She was telling me about hers. It cooks food. I typed back, LOL. She wrote, you are so funny, but seriously, did you redo the counters? I have a guy who does quartz if you need a discount. Although he usually only works on larger projects, there it was. The measurement. The ruler coming out to check the distance between us. She needed to know that my house was smaller, older, and cheaper than hers. She needed to know that the hierarchy remained intact. We like it how it is. I replied. Okay, she wrote. Just trying to help. No need to be defensive. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. I was not being defensive. I was being private. But to Marin and Elaine, privacy was an act of aggression. In their world, love was demonstrated by a lack of boundaries. If you loved someone, you gave them the keys to your house, the password to your bank account, and the right to criticize your curtains. By withholding the details of my life, I was violating the social contract of our family. I was refusing to provide the content they needed to construct their own self-image. If they couldn't look down on me, how would they know they were high up? A strange tension began to settle over my interactions with them in the months leading up to Marin's birthday dinner. It wasn't an open conflict. It was a cold front. Elaine stopped asking about my job. She stopped asking about Evan. Instead, she would make vague, passive-aggressive comments about loyalty and gratitude whenever we spoke. It is funny, she said once over the phone. I saw the Miller family at the club yesterday. Their daughter just bought a house, and the first thing she did was host a dinner for her parents. She said she wanted to honor the people who got her there. I thought that was so sweet. That is sweet, I said, refusing to take the bait. Yes, Elaine said, her voice tight. Very sweet. It must be nice to feel included. I realized then that my independence was hurting them more than any insult could. When I was struggling, when I was the late bloomer, I was useful. I was a project. I was a cautionary tale they could comfort themselves with. But a happy, self-sufficient Ruby, a Ruby who owned a home, excelled at a job involving federal regulations, and had a husband who adored her, that Ruby was a threat. I was disrupting the ecosystem, and nature, even a twisted nature like my family's, abhors a vacuum. If I wasn't going to offer myself up as the sacrificial failure, they were going to have to find another way to restore the balance. I didn't know it at the time, but while I was planting basil in my sunny backyard and checking compliance logs at Luminark, the machinery of their resentment was already turning. They were not just annoyed that I hadn't invited them to a party, they were desperate. Marin's perfect life was expensive. The quartz counters, the wolf range, the landscaping, the image, it all required fuel, and from what I would later discover, the fuel tank was running on fumes. Tyler's job wasn't as secure as they pretended. The mortgage was an adjustable rate that was adjusting in the wrong direction. They looked at me quiet, steady, uncomplaining Ruby, And they didn't just see a sister or a daughter, they saw a resource that was going to waste. They saw a credit score that wasn't being utilized. They saw equity that wasn't being leveraged. I thought I was safe because I had built a wall. I didn't realize that to people like Ron and Marin, a wall is just something you tunnel under. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the wind rattle the old window panes of my beloved, imperfect house, I felt a flicker of unease. It was the instinct of a compliance officer sensing a pattern in the data that didn't quite add up. Why were they pushing so hard? Why did the questions about the house feel less like curiosity and more like an appraisal? I pushed the thought away. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself they were just jealous. But paranoia is just a state of heightened awareness, and jealousy is a motive. I fell asleep thinking about my garden, about the mint taking over the soil. I didn't know that weeds were already growing in my financial records, planted by the people who claimed to love me the most. I had stopped performing for them, so they had decided to cast me in a new role without my consent. The role of the financier. It started with a notification on my phone while I was brushing my teeth. It was a Tuesday morning, the sort of gray, nondescript Tuesday that usually passes without incident. But in the digital age, drama does not need an appointment. It just vibrates in your pocket. The notification was from Facebook. Elaine had tagged me in an album titled The Art of Living Marin's Housewarming. I spat out the toothpaste, rinsed my mouth, and sat on the edge of the bathtub to scroll. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was emotional self-harm. But curiosity is a reflex that is hard to suppress. The photos were spectacular. They were also completely terrifying. Marin's new living room looked less like a place where human beings watch television, and more like a spread in a catalog for people who do not have children or pets or red wine. There were floral arrangements that must have stood 4 feet high, towering over the guests like botanical sentries. The flowers were white hydrangeas and eucalyptus, perfectly arranged to look effortless. Though anyone who has ever arranged flowers knows that effortless takes about 2 hours and floral wire. The food was an architectural feat. There was a grazing table that spanned the length of the dining room, piled high with artisanal cheeses, grapes that looked like they had been polished individually, and crackers arranged in geometric spirals. It was beautiful. It was excessive. It screamed to the world that the Caldwells were not just surviving, they were flourishing. But it was the caption that made my stomach turn. My mother had written a 3-paragraph essay to accompany the photos. So proud of my daughter Marin and her wonderful husband Tyler. She wrote, "It takes a special kind of dedication to build a life of this caliber. This is what happens when you work hard, stay focused, and honor your family values. The Jenkins Caldwell legacy is strong. We build castles, not just houses. Elaine had co-opted the house. She had co-opted the success. By using that plural pronoun, she was claiming Marin's square footage as her own personal victory lap. I swiped to the next photo. It was a candid shot of Marin laughing, her head thrown back, holding a glass of champagne. She looked radiant. She also looked like she was acting. I had seen that laugh 1,000 times. It was the laugh she used when she didn't get the joke, but knew she was supposed to be amused. Evan walked into the bathroom, toweling off his hair. He glanced at the phone in my hand and sighed. "Are we looking at the royal coronation?" he asked. "The grazing table is bigger than our car," I said, showing him the screen. Evan leaned in, squinting at the photo. He studied it for a long moment, his architect's eye scanning the details that I had missed. He didn't comment on the cheese or the flowers. He pointed to the background. "That is weird," he said. "What?" "Look at the lighting," Evan said. "And the furniture placement. Nobody lives like that. Ruby, see where the armchair is? It is blocking the flow to the patio door. And those lamps, those are studio lights reflected in the window, not house lamps. It looks like a set." "Marin likes things perfect," I said. "You know that." "No," Evan said, straightening up. "I mean, it literally looks like a set. It looks staged. It does not look like a home that has been lived in for 3 months. It looks like a showroom that was set up on Friday afternoon to be taken down on Monday morning." I looked at the photo again. He was right. There were no personal items, no mail on the counter, no stray shoes by the door, no remote controls. It was sterile. It was a vacuum-sealed packet of success. The cracks in the image started to appear a few days later. Not on social media, but in the real world. I bumped into an old acquaintance at the grocery store. A woman named Sarah, who had gone to high school with Marin and me. Sarah worked for a high-end event rental company in Columbus. "I saw the photos of Marin's party," Sarah said, leaning over her cart of organic kale. "It looked amazing. I was surprised she went with the platinum package, though that creates a lot of work for the loadout crew." I froze, holding a carton of eggs. "The platinum package." "Yeah," Sarah said, oblivious to the bomb she was dropping. "The furniture rental, the mid-century modern velvet sofas, the accent chairs, the rugs. We delivered them on Thursday. She rented the entire living room setup for the weekend. She said her custom furniture was delayed from Italy, so she needed placeholders." I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral. "Right, the delay. From Italy." "It happens," Sarah shrugged. "Supply chains are a nightmare, but honestly, between you and me, most people just use folding chairs. Renting $10,000 worth of furniture for a 6-hour party, that is bold." $10,000. Marin had spent $10,000 to rent furniture so that her guests would not see an empty room. She had rented a lifestyle for 48 hours. "And the guests?" Sarah continued, lowering her voice. "I saw the tag list. I didn't recognize any of her close friends. It seemed like it was mostly people from her firm and Tyler's bank. It looked professional, like a networking mixer disguised as a housewarming." I drove home that day with a pit in my stomach. The photos were a lie. The caption was a lie. The entire event was a theatrical production designed to convince the audience and perhaps Marin herself that everything was fine. But if you looked closely at the supporting cast, the story fell apart. I went back to the album and zoomed in on Tyler. I hadn't paid much attention to him the first time. He was standing in the background of a photo where Marin was cutting a cake. He wasn't looking at the cake. He was looking at the floor. His shoulders were slumped. His suit, usually tailored to within an inch of its life, looked slightly loose, as if he had lost weight rapidly. There were dark circles under his eyes that even the high-contrast filter couldn't hide. He looked like a man who was waiting for the police to knock on the door. He looked like a man who knew that the furniture had to go back on Monday. That was when the phone calls started changing. For years, my conversations with Elaine had been a barrage of criticism disguised as advice. But suddenly, the tone shifted. She started calling me during the day, when she knew I was at work. "I just wanted to hear your voice," she said on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. I put down my pen. "Is everything okay, Mom?" "Oh, you know," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It is just heavy. Being the matriarch is a heavy job. Ruby, you don't understand it yet, but holding a family together takes a toll." "What is wrong?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "It is Marin," she sighed. "She is under so much pressure. You saw the party. It was magnificent, wasn't it? But people don't realize the cost of excellence, the envy she has to deal with, the expectations. Tyler as well. Tyler is doing his best, but he doesn't have the same stamina that we Jenkins women have. Marin is carrying the world on her shoulders." She was laying the groundwork. I could feel it. She was painting Marin not as a reckless spender who rented furniture to impress strangers, but as a martyr to her own high standards. She was making Marin a victim of her own success, which meant that anyone who didn't help her was essentially kicking a hero while she was down. Then came the text from Ron. Ron never texted. Ron communicated through grunts and the occasional forward of a political email chain. But on a Friday night, my phone buzzed. Family is the only thing that matters in the end. The text read, "Money comes and goes. Ruby, but blood is forever. We have to be the net that catches each other." I showed the phone to Evan. "He sounds like a mob boss," Evan said dryly, "or someone who is about to ask for a kidney." "They are running out of money," I said. The realization hit me with the clarity of a spreadsheet reconciling. That is what this is. The party was the last hurrah. They blew the budget to make it look like they were winning, and now the bill is due. And they think you are the bank, Evan said. They don't think I am the bank, I corrected him. They think I am the ATM. There is a difference. A bank requires an application. An ATM just requires a PIN code. I waited for the ask. I knew it was coming. I prepared my defenses. I rehearsed my no. I looked at our savings account, the money we had put aside for a new roof and a trip to Maine, and I swore to myself that I would not let them touch a cent of it. But they were smarter than I gave them credit for. They didn't come out and ask for money immediately. They buttered me up first. Elaine invited me to lunch. Just me. No Marin. No Ron. We met at a bistro near my office. She was wearing a new scarf. Silk. Probably expensive. She ordered a salad and picked at it. You know, she said, looking me in the eye with an intensity that made me nervous. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile the other day. I didn't realize you had been promoted to senior compliance manager. It happened a few months ago, I said guardedly. I am impressed, Elaine said, and then she said the words that made the trap snap shut. You are doing better than I thought. Ruby, you really are. I look at Marin, and she is so flashy, so big, but you are solid. You have built something real. It was the first compliment she had given me in 20 years that didn't have a barb attached to it. It felt warm. It felt good. And that was why it was dangerous. She was validating me not because she was proud, but because she needed to verify my solvency. She was checking the structural integrity of the bridge before she drove a tank over it. Thanks, Mom, I said, keeping my voice even. It is funny, she continued, leaning in. Marin has the image, but you have the stability. I told Ron last night. I said, Ruby is the one with the head on her shoulders. We rely on you more than you know. You rely on me, I asked. For what? For peace of mind, she said smoothly. Just knowing you are okay. Knowing that if anything happened well, that we have one child who is standing on firm ground. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was cold. Marin is struggling. Ruby, she whispered. The house, it was a stretch. Tyler's bonus didn't come through the way they expected. The market is volatile. They just need a little runway. Just a bridge to get them to the next quarter. There it was. The bridge. What are you asking? Mom? I asked. I am not asking for anything, she said, recoiling slightly as if the word money was vulgar. I am just saying if the situation arose where your sister needed a temporary hand, just a small, short-term liquidity solution, I would hope that you would remember that you are the strong one. You are the one who can afford to be generous. A liquidity solution, I repeated. You mean a loan? I mean family helping family, she said sharply. Don't make it sound like a transaction. It is love, Ruby. It is what we do. I looked at her. I saw the fear behind her eyes. It wasn't just about Marin's mortgage. It was about Elaine's reputation. If Marin failed, Elaine failed. If the house was foreclosed on, the narrative of the perfect family would collapse. She needed my money to prop up the stage set so the play could continue. I have to get back to work, I said, standing up. Just think about it, Elaine called after me. She is your sister, and you are doing so well. You have so much more than you need. I walked back to my office, the wind biting at my face. I felt dirty. I felt used. But more than that, I felt a deep, chilling clarity. They had audited me. They had assessed my value. And they had decided that my purpose in life was to be the insulation that kept Marin warm. I went back to my desk and logged into my bank account. I changed my passwords. I set up two-factor authentication. I locked everything down. But as I stared at the screen, I remembered the papers I had sent Elaine months ago, the insurance forms she had asked for, the ones that had my social security number, my date of birth, my previous addresses, just for the family policy. She had said, I want to make sure everyone is covered in case of an emergency. I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my spine. They didn't just want a loan, they felt entitled to my stability. And if I wouldn't give it to them willingly, I began to wonder, would they just take it? I didn't know it then. But the housewarming party wasn't just a party. It was a fundraising event, and I was the silent donor who hadn't even bought a ticket. The liquidity solution was already in motion, and it wasn't going to be a check I wrote. It was going to be a signature I never made. The request did not come in a dark alley or a desperate midnight phone call. It arrived on a Sunday afternoon, served alongside Earl Grey tea and lemon poppy seed cake in my mother's living room. The setting was deliberate. Elaine always conducted her most predatory business in the softest, most comfortable environments, because it made saying no feel like a violation of the furniture. I had been summoned for what was billed as a family strategy session. Evan had offered to come, but I told him to stay home. I knew that if he were there, they would behave differently. They would mask their entitlement. I needed to see them clearly, without the filter of company manners. When I sat down, the air in the room felt pressurized. Ron was sitting in his leather recliner, his fingers steepled together in a pose of judicial wisdom. Elaine was pouring tea, her movements tight and jerky. "Ruby," Elaine started, handing me a cup and saucer. "We need to talk about solutions." "Solutions for what?" I asked, though I knew the answer. The answer was the $10,000 worth of rental furniture and the mortgage that was eating them alive. "For Marin," Elaine said. She sat down on the edge of the sofa, looking at me with wide, pleading eyes that I had learned to distrust. "She is in a bit of a bind, a temporary bind. The market shifts have affected Tyler's commission schedule, and the renovations on the new house went over budget. It is a perfect storm." "I am sorry to hear that," I said. I took a sip of the tea. It was bitter. "We knew you would be," Ron said, nodding solemnly. "That is why we called you. We need to circle the wagons. We need to stabilize the ship." "Okay," I said. "What kind of advice does she need? Does she need help looking at her budget?" "Evan is great at finding ways to cut utility costs, and I can look at her." Elaine cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. "She does not need advice. Ruby, she does not need you to look at her electric bill. That is insulting. She is not poor. She is illiquid." "Illiquid," I repeated. "Exactly," Elaine said. "She has assets. The house is an asset. Her brand is an asset. But right now, she needs cash to bridge the gap until Tyler's bonus clears in 2 months. We are asking you to step in." She said it so casually, as if asking me to pass the sugar. "How much?" I asked. Elaine exchanged a glance with Ron. $25,000. I set my cup down. I did it slowly, deliberately, ensuring it did not rattle against the saucer. $25,000. That was not a bridge. That was the foundation of an entire house in some parts of the country. That was the savings I had scraped together over 5 years of bringing lunch to work and driving a car with a dented bumper. "You want me to write Marin a check for $25,000? I stated. "It is a loan," Ron interjected quickly, his voice taking on a booming, authoritative quality. "A short-term, family-backed loan. We would co-sign, of course, in spirit." "In spirit?" I looked at him. "Does the bank accept spiritual co-signers?" Ron's face reddened. "Do not be difficult, Ruby. We are talking about your sister. Her credit utilization is a little high right now, so going to a traditional lender would damage her score. We need to protect her rating. That is why we keep it in the family." "So let me get this straight," I said, feeling a cold, hard anger crystallizing in my chest. Marin spent money she did not have to impress people she does not like. She rented furniture to fake a lifestyle, and now, to protect the credit score that allowed her to buy a house she cannot afford. "You want me to give her my savings?" "You are twisting it," Elaine snapped. "You are making it sound ugly. It is not ugly. It is love. You have the money. Ruby, we know you do. You live so simply. What are you saving it for? A rainy day? Well, it is raining on your sister." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had criticized my starter home, who had ignored my promotions, who had treated my life as a consolation prize, and now, suddenly, my simple life was the gold mine they wanted to excavate. "I have a question," I said. "Go ahead," Ron said, looking relieved, thinking I was moving toward negotiation. "When I was 22, I said, keeping my voice steady, "I was working the morning shift at the coffee shop and the night shift at the library to pay for my final semester. I had pneumonia. I called you, Mom, and asked if you could help me with $200 for antibiotics and groceries because I had missed 3 days of work." Elaine stiffened. "That was a long time ago. Ruby, do you remember what you said?" I asked. She looked away. "I was trying to teach you independence. You said that bailouts create weakness," I quoted. "You said that if you gave me the money, I would never learn to manage my own crises. You said hunger was an excellent motivator. So, I went to work with a fever of 102 degrees. I coughed until I threw up in the break room. And then I went back to shelving books." "That is different," Ron grunted. "You were a student. You were building character." "And Marin is 36 years old," I said. "Why is she exempt from character building? Why is my struggle a lesson? But her struggle is a tragedy that requires a rescue mission." "Because she has more to lose," Elaine shouted. The veneer of politeness shattered. She stood up, her hands balling into fists. "She has a reputation, Ruby. She has a standing in this community. If she defaults on her payments, people will talk. It will be humiliating. For all of us. You were just a student. Nobody was watching you. It did not matter if you failed." There it was, the naked, ugly truth. My suffering did not matter because it happened in the dark. Marin's suffering mattered because it happened under a spotlight. "I see," I said. I stood up. "My answer is no." The room went silent. It was the kind of silence that follows a car crash. "Excuse me?" Ron asked, blinking as if he had misheard. "No," I said again. "I will not lend Marin $25,000. I will not lend her $25. Not because I do not have it, but because I'm not going to finance a lie. If she cannot afford the house, she needs to sell it." "You are destroying this family," Elaine hissed. Her face was pale, her eyes venomous. "You are selfish. You have always been selfish, hoarding your money, judging everyone else. You think you are better than us." "No, Mom," I said, walking toward the door. "I think I'm finished." I walked out of the house. My hands were shaking, but my steps were light. I got into my car and drove away, leaving them in their beautiful living room with their tea and their panic. But they were not done. The guilt trip is a multi-stage weapon. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Marin. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I knew that would only prolong the agony. I picked up. "Ruby." Her voice was tight, high-pitched. It sounded like a violin string being tuned until it was about to snap. "Hi, Marin," I said. "Mom told me," she said. She let out a wet, ragged laugh. "She said you told them to let me drown. Is that true?" "That is not what I said, Marin." "It feels like what you said," she cried. The tears were close now. "You have no idea what it is like, Ruby. The pressure, everyone looking at me, waiting for me to slip up. Tyler is a mess. He sits in his office with the lights off. I am trying to hold it all together. I just need a lifeline. Just for a few months. I would pay you back with interest. 10%, 15%, whatever you want." "It is not about the interest, Marin," I said softly. "Then what is it about?" she screamed. The sound distorted in the speaker. "Is it because you are jealous? Is that it? You are jealous because I have the house and the life? And you are stuck in that little box in Westerville. You want to see me fail so you can finally feel big." "I am not jealous," I said. "And I am not lending you the money because I love you enough to tell you the truth. You cannot afford this life, Marin, and borrowing money from me won't fix that. It will just delay the inevitable." "You are such a bitch," she sobbed. "I always knew it. You act so quiet and nice, but deep down, you are cold. You are ice cold. Don't worry, Ruby. I won't ask you again. I will figure it out. I always do. But don't expect me to forget this. When you need someone, don't look at me. I never have. Marin, I said. The line went dead. I sat on my back porch, watching the sun go down over my garden. The mint I had planted was thriving, spreading its roots deep into the soil. It was real. It was mine. The fallout was immediate and digital. That evening, I opened the family group chat to check on a message from an aunt. The chat was usually a stream of photos of Marin's dogs, Elaine's garden, and Ron's grilling victories. I saw a notification Elaine has removed Ruby from the conversation. I blinked. It was so petty, so high school, that I almost laughed. But then the ache hit me. It was a sharp, physical pain in the center of my chest. It wasn't the loss of the chat that hurt. It was the ease with which they discarded me. I was useful as long as I was compliant. The moment I closed my wallet, I ceased to be family. Over the next few weeks, the silence from their end was absolute. No calls, no texts, but on social media, the performance continued. Elaine posted a photo of the three of them, Ron, Elaine, and Marin at a dinner. The caption read, "Through thick and thin, the core team stays strong. Loyalty is everything." The core team. I had been redacted. Evan found me one night sitting at the kitchen table, staring at that photo. He took the phone from my hand and set it face down on the table. "They are hurting you," he said. "I know," I said. "I just feel guilty. Maybe I should have helped. Maybe $25,000 is a small price to pay to have a mother." Evan pulled up a chair and sat across from me. He took my hands in his. His grip was warm and rough from working in the yard. "Ruby," he said seriously, "that is not the price of having a mother. That is the price of renting a mother. And the rent goes up every month. If you had paid it, they would be back in June asking for $30,000, and in December asking for $50,000. He paused, looking at me with that intense, architectural focus. "You have to decide," he said. "You let people into your life through doors. Some people come through the front door guests, friends, people who respect the house. Some people try to break in through the window, your family. They are demanding you take the door off the hinges so they can walk in and take the furniture whenever they want. You have to decide which door they get, or if they get a door at all." "I locked the door," I whispered. "Good," Evan said. "Now put the deadbolt on." I thought the silence meant it was over. I thought that by refusing the money, I had ended the transaction. I thought they would just be angry, and eventually, we would settle into a distant, polite estrangement. I was naive. I treated my family like rational actors. I assumed that when denied a loan, they would seek a legal alternative, or perhaps downsize. I did not understand that desperation rearranges a person's morality. When you refuse to open the door for someone who feels entitled to your house, they don't just walk away, they look for a spare key. And if they can't find a spare key, they look for a way to pick the lock. I had said no to the loan, but I had forgotten about the yes I had given months ago, the innocent yes, when Elaine asked for my information for the insurance policy. I had closed my wallet, but I had left my identity on the table. The silence that followed my refusal wasn't the silence of acceptance. It was the silence of people who were busy working. They weren't ignoring me. They were becoming me. The letter arrived on a Saturday morning, sandwiched between a coupon flyer for a pizza chain and a catalog for outdoor furniture. It looked innocuous enough. It was a standard business envelope with a cellophane window, the kind that usually holds a generic offer for a low-interest credit card or a notice about changes to privacy policies. I almost threw it in the recycling bin without opening it. I was standing in the kitchen, drinking my second cup of coffee, watching a cardinal pick at the feeder in the backyard. The sun was hitting the linoleum floor, and the house felt peaceful, the kind of peace Evan and I had carefully constructed behind our locked doors. But something about the logo in the corner caught my eye. It was from a bank I did not use. It was a regional lender, the kind that finances car lots and mid-tier construction projects. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. I unfolded the single sheet of paper. It was a notice of delinquency. My eyes scanned the text, my brain trying to reject the information as it came in. It stated that my payment of $432 was 30 days past due. It referenced an account number ending in 7442. It politely demanded immediate remittance to avoid further collection actions. I frowned. Taking a sip of coffee, it had to be a mistake. A clerical error. Perhaps someone with a similar name, a Ruby Jennings or a Ruby Jensen, had missed a payment, and the wires had crossed in some database. I was a compliance manager. I did not miss payments. My financial life was a grid of perfectly aligned zeros and ones. I went into the home office and woke up my computer. I decided to log into my credit monitoring service. Just to be sure. I expected to see my score sitting where it always did, in the high 700s, a testament to my boring, responsible life. The page loaded. I stared at the screen. The number was not in the high 700s. It was 640. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a slow slide. It was the physical sensation of an elevator cable snapping. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving my hands cold and tingling, a drop of over 100 points. That was not a clerical error. That was a catastrophe. I clicked on the tab for Open Accounts. There it was. A line of credit opened 3 months ago. The balance was sitting at $14,000. I clicked for more details. The account was a high-interest personal line of credit, the kind used for home renovations or debt consolidation, but it was the address associated with the account that made the room spin. It was not my address in Westerville. It was a post office box in the 43215 zip code. I knew that zip code. I knew it because I had addressed a birthday card there just last week. It was the zip code for the upscale neighborhood where Maren and Tyler lived. I sat back in my chair, the letter crinkling in my fist. A logical part of my brain tried to find an innocent explanation. Maybe Maren had put me down as a reference. Maybe there was some sort of family trust I didn't know about. But the compliance officer in me, the part of me that hunted fraud for a living, knew better. References do not appear on your credit report as primary debt holders. I reached for my phone. I did not call Maren. I did not call Elaine. I called the number listed on the back of the bank letter. "Thank you for calling Regional First," a computerized voice said. "For fraud, press 4. I pressed 4. My hand was shaking so badly I almost missed the button. A woman came on the line after 2 minutes of hold music that sounded like a distorted jazz clarinet. "Fraud Department. This is Brenda. Can I have your full name?" "Ruby Jenkins," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from inside a tin can. "And can you verify your social security number and date of birth?" I gave her the information. "Thank you, Ms. Jenkins," Brenda said, her voice shifting to a tone of professional concern. "I see you are calling about the delinquency notice. Are you prepared to make a payment today?" "I did not open this account," I said. I tried to keep the hysteria out of my voice. "I have never banked with you. I do not have a line of credit with you. This is a mistake." "Okay," Brenda said, the clicking of a keyboard audible in the background. "Let me pull up the application file. It was opened on February the 14th. We have a signed electronic agreement and a copy of your driver's license on file." "My driver's license," I whispered. "Yes, ma'am. A scan of the front and back, and the digital signature matches the signature on the ID." The room seemed to tilt. My driver's license. I kept it in my wallet. I never lost it. How could anyone have a scan of it? And then a memory hit me. It was a sharp, vivid flashback to a Sunday lunch at my mother's house back in January, right before Maren's housewarming party. Elaine had been in the kitchen, making coffee. She'd been talking about insurance. "Ron is looking into a new umbrella policy for the whole family," she had said, casually stirring cream into her cup. "With the world the way it is, you can never be too safe. He wants to make sure everyone is covered, you. Evan, Maren, Tyler. It is a gift. He is paying the premiums. I had been touched. I had thought it was a gesture of care. That is really nice of him." I had said, "I just need to update the files." Elaine had said, pulling out her phone. Can you just let me snap a picture of your license? Ron needs the exact details for the underwriter. And verify your social. I had opened my wallet. I had taken out my license. I had laid it on the granite countertop the granite Marin had admired and let my mother take a photo of it. I had recited my social security number while she typed it into her notes app. I had handed them the keys to my identity between the salad course and the main course. Ms. Jenkins, Brenda asked, "Are you still there?" "I am here," I said. My throat felt dry, like I had swallowed sand. "You said there was a verification. Did you call me to verify the application?" "One moment," Brenda said. "Yes, we performed a two-factor authentication via text message to the mobile number on the application. The code was entered correctly. Read me the last 4 digits of the mobile number," I said. "The number ends in 8992. I closed my eyes. 8992. It wasn't my number. It wasn't Evan's number. It wasn't even Marin's number. It was Ron's cell phone number. Ron, the man who preached about family values. Ron, the neutral party. Ron, who had sat in the recliner and told me that family was a safety net. He had verified the fraud. He had received the text message from the bank asking, "Is this Ruby Jenkins?" and he had typed yes. "I see," I said. "Ms. Jenkins, does that number belong to you?" Brenda asked. "No," I said. "It does not?" "I see," Brenda said, her voice dropping an octave. "I am going to mark this account as disputed pending a fraud investigation. I will need you to file a police report and an affidavit of identity theft. I can email you the packet." "Please do," I said. I hung up the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I sat there in the silence of my office, feeling a coldness spread through my chest that was absolute and terrifying. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't my mother being pushy or Marin being competitive. This was a felony. Evan walked into the office a moment later, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He stopped when he saw my face. He set the mugs down on the bookshelf and crossed the room in 2 strides. "Ruby, what is it? Is it your dad?" "No," I said. I turned the screen toward him so he could see the credit report. "It is my family." I explained it to him. I laid out the timeline, the photo of the license, the denied loan request, the account opening date, the phone number. As I spoke, the horror on Evan's face mirrored my own, but then his horror turned to fury. "Get your coat," Evan said, his voice hard. "Why?" "We are going to the police station, and then we are going to their house. This ends today." "No," I said. Evan stopped, his hand on the doorknob. "Ruby, they stole $14,000 in your name. That is grand larceny. You cannot protect them from this." "I am not protecting them," I said. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the street, at the normal world where people didn't steal their children's identities to buy curtains. If we go there now, they will deny it. They will say it was a misunderstanding. They will say Ron mixed up the paperwork. They will cry. Elaine will say she just wanted to help Marin and she got confused. They will gaslight us until we question our own sanity. "So what do?" Evan asked. "We just pay it." "No," I said. "We don't pay a dime, but we don't scream either." I turned back to look at him. I felt different. The part of me that had always craved their approval, the part of me that wanted to be the good daughter, had finally died. It hadn't been a peaceful death. It had been an execution. And in its place was something else, something precise, something that worked in compliance and knew how to build a case. "We are going to get the full file," I said. "I am going to get the copy of the application with the forged signature. I am going to get the phone records. I am going to get the IP address where the application was submitted. I am going to build a binder. Evan, a thick, heavy binder. And then I am going to wait." I said. "Wait for what?" "For them to mention it," I said. "If this was a mistake, they would have told me. If Ron accidentally used my name, he would have called, but they haven't. They are banking on my silence. They are banking on the fact that I am the quiet one, the one who doesn't check, the one who cleans up the messes. I walked back to the desk and sat down. I opened a new folder on my computer and named it Project Glass House. I want to see how far they will go, I told Evan. I want to see if they will look me in the eye at the next family dinner and ask how I am, knowing they are robbing me. I want to see the performance. Evan looked at me with a mixture of concern and respect. That is cold. Ruby, they taught me, I said. They taught me that appearances are everything, so I am going to let them keep up appearances until I'm ready to turn on the lights. I spent the rest of the day in a fugue state of investigation. I pulled reports from all 3 credit bureaus. The damage was extensive but contained. It seemed to be just this one loan so far. It was a home improvement line of credit. The timing aligned perfectly with the photos of Marin's new patio and the high-end furniture. They hadn't just borrowed money. They had extracted my financial reputation and poured it into concrete for a fire pit I would never be invited to sit around. I found one more document in the digital pile. It was the co-signing agreement. There, at the bottom of the page, was a scrawl that looked frighteningly like my signature. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough to pass a casual inspection. It was a loopier version of my R, a slightly sharper Y. I stared at it. Someone had practiced this. Someone likely Marin. Given the handwriting style, had sat at a table with a pen and a piece of paper and practiced becoming me. I imagined them sitting around that kitchen island. Elaine probably encouraged it. Just sign it. Honey, Ruby won't mind. We will pay it back before she even notices. It is just paperwork. Ron probably nodded, checking the interest rates. They had turned me into a ghost in my own life. I printed the page and slid it into a plastic sheet protector. I felt a strange sense of calm. The confusion was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the evidence. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Elaine. Hi, honey. We are thinking of doing a spring brunch next Sunday. Just family. Ron is making his famous waffles. Hope you guys can make it. We miss you. I looked at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. They were stealing from me with one hand and waving at me with the other. I typed back, "We will be there." Evan watched me. "Are you sure you can do this? Sit there and eat waffles with them." "I can," I said, "because now I know who they are. I am not eating with my family anymore. Evan, I am eating with the defendants." I turned off the computer. The sun had moved across the room, casting long shadows against the wall. The house was quiet, but it was no longer the silence of peace. It was the silence of a courtroom before the gavel falls. I had always wondered when I would catch up to them. I finally had. I was right behind them, holding the receipt. The office of Marcus Sterling was located on the 18th floor of a glass building downtown, far enough away from the suburbs to feel like a different planet. It smelled of leather polish and expensive coffee. I sat in a chair that cost more than my first car, my hands folded in my lap, while Mr. Sterling reviewed the file I had built. He was a fraud specialist. He dealt with identity theft, embezzlement, and the messy, bloody financial wounds that people inflict on one another. He turned the pages of my credit report with a rhythmic snick, snick, snick sound that seemed to count down the seconds of my old life. "It is a classic familial construction," Mr. Sterling said. Finally looking up, he took off his reading glasses. 70% of identity fraud is committed by someone the victim knows. Parents, siblings, spouses, strangers. Usually just want your credit card number to buy televisions. Family members want your credit history to buy a life. "I need to know how to stop it," I said, "and I need to know how to prove it without a shadow of a doubt." "We can freeze everything today," he said. "That stops the bleeding. But the wound is already there. You have a $14,000 line of credit that is currently accruing interest. To remove it, you have to prove you did not authorize it. And to do that, you have to file a police report naming the perpetrator." He slid a document across the desk. It was a draft of a police report. "This is the nuclear option," he warned. "Once you file this, there is no unfiling it. The bank will pursue criminal charges to recover their loss. The district attorney might pick it up. Your stepfather could face felony charges for wire fraud and forgery. I looked at the paper. I am not ready to file it today. I need one more thing. What is that? I need to hear him do it. I left the office with a distinct set of instructions. I had to document everything. I had to act normally. I had to gather the final pieces of the puzzle to ensure that when the trap snapped shut, it did not catch my fingers by mistake. My next stop was not home. It was a quiet coffee shop where I could use the public Wi-Fi to access the cloud drive the bank's fraud department had shared with me after my initial dispute. They had been surprisingly helpful once I used the correct legal terminology Mr. Sterling had coached me on. There was a file labeled Verification Audio 021. My hand hovered over the mouse. This was it, the moment of truth. The application had been submitted online, but because of the loan amount, a verbal verification call had been required. I knew for a fact I hadn't taken that call. I had been in a quarterly compliance audit meeting that day for 4 hours. I put my headphones in. I pressed play. The recording started with a burst of static, then a bank representative's voice. I am looking to speak with Ruby Jenkins to verify a loan application. Speaking, a voice answered. I felt the blood drain from my face so fast it made me dizzy. It was not a woman's voice. It was a man's voice, pitching itself higher, trying to sound soft, trying to sound like me. No, he wasn't trying to sound like me. He was trying to sound like a generic, non-threatening female. But the timbre was wrong. It was gravelly. It was deep. I need to verify the date of birth, the representative said. June 4th, 1990, the voice said. I knew that voice. I knew the specific way the speaker cleared his throat before answering. A nervous tick, hem-hem, that I had heard at the dinner table for 20 years. It was Ron. And do you authorize the disbursement of $14,000 to the contractor listed on the account? The representative asked. Yes, Ron said. We need to get the patio finished before the party. The recording ended. I sat there, staring at the screen. The patio, the contractor, was likely a shell. Or perhaps they had actually paid a builder to pave Marin's backyard with my credit score. Ron, the neutral party, the man who sat in his recliner and watched football while Elaine tore me apart. The man who preached that family was a safety net. He wasn't neutral. He was the architect. I opened my phone and scrolled back through my text messages with Ron. I went back to February. I found the date. February 14th. There it was. A text from Ron at 8 in the morning. Hey, Ruby. Just checking in. You mentioned you had that big audit meeting today. What time does that run? Don't want to bug you while you are presenting, I had replied. Thanks, Ron. I am in the secure room from 9 to 1. No phones allowed. He hadn't been being considerate. He had been checking my schedule. He needed to know exactly when I would be unreachable so he could take the verification call on the secondary number he had listed on the application, his own burner phone. Or perhaps he had even forwarded my calls somehow. No, the bank called the number on the application. He had put his number down as mine. It was premeditated. It was cold. It was calculated. He knew I would be in a secure room. He submitted the application at 9:15. He took the call at 10. He stole my identity while I was doing my job ensuring other people followed the rules. I closed my laptop. A cold fury settled over me. It was different from the hurt I had felt before. Hurt is hot. It burns and makes you cry. This was ice. It made me sharp, but there was one loose end. Marin, did she know Elaine was the driver? Clearly. Ron was the mechanic who fixed the engine. But was Marin just the passenger? Or was she holding the map I needed to know? If Marin was truly innocent, if she thought the money came from a bonus or a legitimate loan Ron took out, then perhaps she deserved a warning. But if she knew I walked out to my car and dialed Marin's number, she picked up on the second ring. Hello? Her voice sounded wary. We hadn't spoken since the phone call where she called me a bitch. Hi, Marin, I said. I kept my voice light, breezy, the voice of a sister who wants to make amends. I was just thinking about you. I wanted to see how you were doing. I know things were tense with the house expenses. Oh, Marin said, surprised. I'm okay. We are managing. I am glad, I said. I felt bad about the loan request. I know 25,000 is a lot. I was worried you guys might lose the house or have to stop the renovations. No, Marin said quickly. Too quickly. It is fine. We figured it out. That is great, I said. Did Tyler get his bonus early? Something like that, she said. We found a different route. A bridge loan. The patio looks amazing. By the way, you should see it. I bet it does, I said. Interest rates are so high right now. Though, I hope you didn't have to sign anything too crazy. I didn't have to sign anything, Marin said. I paused. You didn't? No, she said, and then she faltered. She realized she had said too much. I mean, Ron handled it. He has connections. He got us a family rate. A family rate, I repeated. That was nice of him. Yeah, Marin said, her voice gaining a defensive edge. He said he took care of the paperwork so I wouldn't have to worry. He said everything is stable now, so we don't need to talk about it. Ron said everything is fine, I echoed. Yes, Marin snapped. Ron said everything is stable. Why are you digging? Ruby. Can't you just be happy that we aren't drowning? You didn't want to help, so you don't get to ask questions about how we survived. You are right, I said. I don't get to ask questions. I am just glad the paperwork is in order. It is, she said. We are having dinner on Sunday. Mom said you are coming. Are you going to be weird? No, I said. I am not going to be weird. I am going to be perfectly clear. I hung up. She knew. Maybe she didn't know the exact mechanism. Maybe she didn't know Ron had forged my signature or used a fake voice. But she knew that she had no money. And then suddenly, she had $14,000 for a patio. She knew that Ron, a middle management logistics guy, didn't have magical connections that gave out interest-free cash. She chose not to ask. She chose the patio over the truth. She chose the image over her sister. In the court of law, that is called willful negligence. In the court of family, it is called betrayal. I drove home. Evan was waiting for me in the kitchen. He had the binder on the table. He had organized the printed emails, the credit report, and the affidavit Mr. Sterling had prepared. Well, Evan asked. It was Ron, I said. He impersonated me on the phone, and Marin knows enough to look the other way. Evan stared at the binder. So we file the police report. Not yet, I said. Why not? Because if I file it now, they will find out via a letter in the mail. I said, they will spin it. Elaine will cry to the rest of the family that I am vindictive. They will control the narrative. They will say I am suing them because I am jealous. So what do you want to do? I want to give them one last chance to tell the truth, I said. I am going to that dinner. I am going to sit at that white tablecloth, and I am going to put the truth on the table next to the salt shaker. They will eat you alive, Evan said. No, I said. I picked up the USB drive containing the audio recording of Ron's voice. They can't eat me. I am not the food anymore. I am the health inspector. I looked at the invitation text on my phone again. Ron is making his famous waffles. It was perfect. They wanted to play Happy Family. They wanted the scene where we all smile and pretend that the foundation isn't rotten. They loved a performance, so I would give them one. I went upstairs to my closet. I bypassed the sensible cardigans and the comfortable slacks I usually wore to avoid drawing attention. I pulled out a dress I had bought for a company gala sharp. Tailored, commanding. I pulled out the heels I rarely wore because they made me taller than Ron. I wasn't going to shrink this time. I wasn't going to be the late bloomer. I was coming as the creditor. Evan, I called out, print 3 copies of the dossier, 1 for each of them. You are going to hand them the evidence. I am going to serve them, I said. They like things to be formal. Let's make it formal. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't heart rate. It was the total absence of fear. I had spent my entire life afraid of losing them. afraid of being cast out. But they had already cast me out. They had looted the room before they locked the door. There was nothing left to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, you are the most dangerous person in the room. Sunday, I whispered to the empty room. We catch up on Sunday. The process of dismantling a life, or at least the financial trellis upon which a life is grown, is surprisingly quiet. There are no sirens. There is no shattering glass. There is only the soft click of a mouse and the hum of a laser printer. On the Monday following my discovery, I did not go to work. I took a personal day. I sat at my desk in the home office, a space that smelled of lemon polish and order, and I initiated the freeze. I contacted Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. I navigated their automated systems with the muscle memory of a woman who does this for a living. I entered my social security number. I answered the security questions, and then, one by one, I locked the doors. Your credit file is now frozen. The screen read, "No new creditors may access your report without a temporary PIN." It felt like boarding up a window before a hurricane. Next came the affidavit. The Federal Trade Commission provides a standardized form for identity theft. It is a dry, passionless document. It asks for dates. It asks for account numbers. It asks for the name of the suspect, if known. I hovered over that box. Name of suspect. My fingers rested on the keyboard. I could type Ron Hargrove. I could type Maren Caldwell. I could blow the entire family structure into the stratosphere right here, right now, with a few keystrokes. But I didn't. Not yet. I left the box blank. I would let the bank's investigation team fill in that blank. I would let the police detective fill in that blank. I wanted the system to find them. I wanted the discovery to be impartial, mathematical, and inevitable. If I named them, it was a vendetta. If the data named them, it was justice. I printed the affidavit. I signed it. The ink looked very dark against the stark white paper. Phase 1 is complete, I said to the empty room. Evan came in a few minutes later. He had taken the day off as well. Standing guard over me like a sentry, he watched me organize the papers into a timeline. I had created a visual aid. It was a single sheet of paper, landscape orientation, with a horizontal line drawn across the middle. On the left, February 14th, 9:15 in the morning, the application is submitted from an IP address in Columbus. Next to it, February 14th, 10:05 in the morning, the verification call is recorded. The voicemail, mid-60s, confident confirms the data. Next, February 16th. $14,000 is disbursed to a verified vendor account labeled Elite Paving and Stone. And finally, March 2nd, a payment of $200 is made from a checking account that does not bear my name. It is a story, I told Evan, tracing the line with my finger. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It tells you exactly who they are. Evan looked at the timeline. He looked at the transcript of the call where Ron had impersonated a woman by simply not correcting the agent's assumption, relying on the agent's desire to close the deal. "Ruby," Evan said. He pulled a chair around and sat facing me. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "I am always honest," I said. "That is my problem." "You are building a case," he said. "You have the evidence to send Ron to prison. You have the evidence to get Maren charged as an accessory, or at least for benefiting from the proceeds of a crime. This is heavy stuff." "I know," I said. "What is the goal?" Evan asked. "Do you want them to hurt? Do you want to see them handcuffed? Do you want to burn the house down to punish them for not inviting you inside?" I looked at the timeline. I thought about the white hydrangeas at Maren's party. I thought about the rental furniture. I thought about the way Elaine had looked at me across the bistro table and called me stable while she was actively picking my pocket. Did I want them to hurt? A small, dark part of me did. The part of me that was 6 years old and waiting for a compliment that never came, wanted them to suffer. But the woman I had become, the woman who planted mint in her garden and loved a man who built things, knew that pain was a trap. If I acted out of a desire to hurt them, I was still engaging with them. I was still playing their game, just on the opposing team. "I don't want them to hurt," I said slowly. "I want to be free." Evan nodded. Free is good. I want the kind of freedom where I never have to wonder if they are lying to me. I continued. I want the freedom of knowing that I am not their resource. I want to sever the cord, and the only way to do that is to put a wall of truth between us that is so high they can never climb over it again. Okay, Evan said. Then we stick to the facts. No drama, no screaming, just the paperwork. Just the paperwork, I agreed. The phone buzzed. It was a text message. I looked at the screen. It was Elaine. Hi, honey. Change of plans for the weekend. We are going to Marin's birthday dinner on Tuesday instead. That Italian place downtown with the mirrors. Just family. We really want you there. Please say yes. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. They were inviting me to the scene of the crime. Not the financial crime, but the emotional crime scene where the dynamic was always enforced. They wanted to sit me down, feed me pasta, and pretend that they weren't wearing clothes bought with my credit rating. They want to go to the Italian place, I told Evan. Tuesday night? The place with the white tablecloths, Evan asked. That is the one. Are we going? I looked at the affidavit. I looked at the timeline. Yes, I said. We are going, I replied to Elaine. We will be there. She sent back a heart emoji. It was red and pulsing. To anyone else, it would look like love. To me, it looked like a warning light on a dashboard. The days leading up to the dinner passed in a blur of strange calm. I felt like an athlete tapering before a big race. I slept well. I ate well. I watered my plants. On Tuesday evening, I got ready with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. I chose a dress that was structured. Navy blue, high-necked. It was not a dress for a party. It was a dress for a deposition. I went to my desk and picked up the documents. I did not take the binder. The binder was too aggressive. The binder looked like I was trying to convince them. Instead, I took 3 sheets of paper. 1. The timeline. 2. The transcript of the call. 3. The notice of the fraud affidavit I had already notarized but not yet mailed. I folded them into thirds. I placed them inside a single, cream-colored envelope. It was thin. It weighed almost nothing. That is it, Evan asked, watching me slide the envelope into my purse. That is all I need, I said. If I have to explain it, I have already lost. They will either look at this and admit what they did, or they will deny it. And if they deny it, then I walk out, I said. And I drop the original affidavit in the mailbox on the corner, and then the bank's legal team takes over. You are giving them a chance to confess, Evan said. I am giving them a chance to surrender, I corrected. There is a difference. Before we left, I stood in my kitchen for a moment. The evening light was filtering through the window above the sink. I looked at the coffee maker, the slightly chipped mug on the drying rack, the basil plant that was leaning toward the sun. This house was real. The mortgage was paid from our salaries. The lights were on because we paid the bill. There were no ghosts here. There were no rented sofas. I remembered our housewarming party. I remembered Sarah laughing. I remembered my neighbor bringing over a 6-pack of beer. They had come because they liked us. They hadn't come to inspect the crown molding. They hadn't come to judge our net worth. That was the difference. My life was built on bedrock. Marin's life was built on a sinkhole that she had tried to fill with my money. I am ready, I said. The drive to Columbus was quiet. Evan drove. I watched the highway markers fly by. Remember the rule? I said as we took the exit toward the city center. No explaining, Evan recited. Right, I said. They thrive on the gray area. They thrive on misunderstandings and emotional context. We don't give them context. We give them binary code, yes or no, true or false. What if Elaine starts crying? Let her cry, I said. Tears do not invalidate a signature. What if Ron gets angry? Let him get angry, I said. Anger does not pay off a $14,000 debt. We pulled up to the valet. The restaurant loomed above us, glowing with that warm amber light that suggests intimacy and wealth. I saw Marin's car already there, a luxury SUV that I now knew was likely leased or leveraged to the hilt. My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs, and then it steadied. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Fear comes from the unknown. Fear comes from wondering what will they think of me. I didn't care what they thought of me. I knew what they had done to me, and that knowledge had stripped away the power they held. I checked my purse one last time. The envelope was there, the weapon of truth. "Let's go," I said. We walked into the restaurant. The air was cool and smelled of truffle oil and expensive perfume. The maitre d' smiled at us. "Jenkins," I said, "we are joining the Caldwell party." "Ah, yes," he said, checking his list. "They are seated at table 4, right in the center." Of course they were. As we walked through the dining room, I saw them. Elaine was laughing, her head thrown back, holding a glass of wine. Marin was checking her reflection in a spoon. Ron was looking at the menu with that feigned neutrality. They looked perfect. They looked like a family that had nothing to hide. For a second, I felt a wave of nausea. How could they sit there, ordering appetizers, knowing that they had committed a crime against the person walking toward them, but then Elaine saw me. "Ruby!" she cried out, waving her napkin. "Over here, you made it." Her smile was dazzling. It was the smile of a predator who thinks the prey has forgotten about the trap. I didn't smile back. I walked to the table. I let Evan pull out my chair. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Hi, Marin, Ron." "You look serious," Marin said, reaching for her wine. "It is a party. Ruby, lighten up. We ordered the calamari." "The calamari is excellent," Ron said. "How was the drive?" "Illuminating," I said. I placed my purse on the table. I didn't open the menu. I sat with my hands folded, watching them. I was the compliance officer. I was the auditor, and the audit was about to begin. I waited for the pleasantries to die down. I waited for the waiter to pour the water. I waited for the moment when the silence stretched just thin enough to break. Elaine leaned in, her eyes sparkling with that dangerous, manic joy. "So," she said, "Marin was just telling us about the neighborhood. It is really coming together. And Ruby, I have to say, I am so glad you came. I know things got a little tense with the request, but we are family. We move on. That is what we do." "We move on," I repeated. "Exactly," Ron said. "Water under the bridge." I looked at Ron. I looked at the man who had practiced my birth date so he could recite it to a bank teller. "I agree," I said. "We should move on. But before we order, there's just one small administrative thing I need to clear up." "Administrative?" Marin laughed nervously. "That sounds like work." "It is work," I said. "It is about a patio." The smile froze on Marin's face. Ron's hand stopped moving toward the breadbasket. I reached into my purse. I felt the cool, smooth paper of the envelope. "I brought something for you," I said. I placed the envelope on the white tablecloth. It sat there, stark and simple, between the salt shaker and the candle. It looked harmless, but we all knew that the most dangerous things in the world are often just pieces of paper. "What is this?" Elaine asked, her voice dropping a register. "It is the truth," I said. "Open it." I didn't offer a preamble. I didn't offer an excuse. I just waited. The system was about to speak, and I was just the messenger. The envelope sat on the table like a landmine disguised as stationery. For a moment, nobody touched it. Elaine glanced at it, her brow furrowing slightly, as if it were a coaster I had misplaced. She dismissed it, just as she had dismissed my feelings for 3 decades. She picked up her wineglass, swirled the Pinot Noir, and decided to return to the script she had written for the evening. This was the moment. This was the scene from the beginning, the one that had played out in my memory 1,000 times, but now I was seeing it through a new lens. I wasn't just the disappointed daughter anymore. I was the prosecutor watching the defendants incriminate themselves before the trial even began. "It is just so lovely to be all together," Elaine said, beaming at Marin. And Marin, honestly, the housewarming party was a triumph. I was telling the girls at the club, it was the social event of the season. It set a standard. She turned her gaze to me. It was a practiced pivot, a shift from adoration to critique that happened so smoothly you almost missed the gears grinding. Which brings me to my question. Ruby, she said, her voice dripping with that faux concern that usually preceded a verbal assault. Your sister is settling in so beautifully. When are you going to catch up? There it was, the hook, the bait, in the past. I would have stuttered. I would have made excuses about the market, or our busy schedules, or simply looked down at my lap and apologized for being a disappointment. But tonight, I looked at the envelope. I thought about the voice recording of Ron impersonating a woman. I thought about the $14,000 of debt attached to my Social Security number. I didn't get angry. I felt a strange, icy clarity wash over me. It was the sensation of waking up from a long, feverish dream. I set my fork down. The metal clicked against the china. It was a small sound, but it cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a gavel. I am not going to catch up, Mom, I said. Elaine blinked, her smile faltering just a fraction. What do you mean? Don't be defeatist. Ruby, of course you can catch up. You just need to prioritize. I mean, I have already finished the race, I interrupted. My voice was low, steady, and devoid of the tremble that usually accompanied my confrontations with her. I organized my housewarming party last year, in October. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the vacuum of a room where all the oxygen had suddenly been sucked out. Marin's wineglass stopped halfway to her mouth. She stared at me, her eyes widening. Ron, who had been reaching for the breadbasket, froze, his hand hovering over a ciabatta roll. Elaine looked as if I had just spoken to her in a dead language. Her brain was trying to process the information, but it didn't fit into the file cabinet of her reality. You what? She whispered. We had a housewarming party. I repeated. We made pizzas. We had a bonfire. We drank beer from the bottle. It was perfect. But, Elaine looked around the table, seeking an ally, seeking someone to tell her this was a joke. But I didn't know about it. Why didn't I know about it? How could you host an event and not tell me? Her shock turned rapidly into indignation. Her face flushed a mottled pink. This wasn't hurt feelings. This was a loss of control. She was the curator of the family image, and I had published an exhibit without her approval. Why wasn't I there? She demanded, her voice rising. I am your mother. Ruby, why wasn't I invited? I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't blink. Because, Mom, I said, you were not on the list. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Elaine recoiled physically, pressing her hand to her chest. Excuse me, not on the list. You had a list, and you deliberately left me off of it. Yes, I said. That is cruel, Marin hissed. She set her glass down hard, liquid sloshing over the rim. That is so petty. Ruby, Mom has done everything for us. She just wants to share in your life. How could you be so exclusionary? I invited the people who came for me, I said, shifting my gaze to my sister. I invited the people who celebrate me when I'm quiet. I invited the people who don't need me to rent furniture to feel comfortable. I invited the people who love me, not the people who find me useful. Ron cleared his throat. It was a rumble of thunder from the end of the table. He put on his head of household face, the one he used when he wanted to shut down a conversation that was becoming inconvenient. Now, Ruby, he said, his voice deep and warning. That is enough. You are being divisive. Family is not about lists. Family is about showing up. You are tearing this family apart with this attitude. I turned to look at him, Ron, the neutral party, the man who had called the bank at 10 in the morning and verified my date of birth. I am not tearing the family apart. Ron, I said, I am just refusing to pay for the glue anymore. What is that supposed to mean? Ron asked, his eyes narrowing. We have never asked you for anything. Haven't you? I asked. You asked for my silence. You asked for my compliance. You asked for me to be the audience for Marin's play. And recently, you have asked for a lot more than that. Marin went pale. She looked at the envelope on the table. She knew. I could see the realization dawning on her face like a sickly sunrise. She knew exactly what more I was talking about. "Ruby," Marin said, her voice trembling. "Stop it. You are making a scene. You are overreacting. Whatever you think is happening, it is not a big deal. We can talk about it later. Don't ruin dinner." "I am not ruining dinner," I said. "I am serving the main course." Elaine, sensing that she was losing control of the narrative, deployed her ultimate weapon. Her eyes filled with tears. It was a performance I had seen 100 times. The quivering lip, the single tear tracking down the cheek, the look of a martyr being stoned by her own ungrateful child. "I don't understand you," she sobbed softly, dabbing at her eyes with a linen napkin. "I really don't. I love you, Ruby. I have always loved you. I push you because I want you to be your best. I want you to have what Marin has, and you treat me like an enemy. It breaks my heart. A mother's love is unconditional, and you throw it back in my face." The old Ruby would have crumbled. The old Ruby would have reached across the table, apologized, and begged for forgiveness. The old Ruby would have accepted the guilt as her due. But the old Ruby didn't have a fraud affidavit in her purse. I watched her cry. I felt nothing. No, that is not true. I felt a distant, clinical fascination. I was watching a magician perform a trick I had already figured out. "Unconditional love," I repeated. "Yes," Elaine sniffled. "Unconditional." "Love is not unconditional when it comes with a price tag," I said. My voice was soft, but it carried across the table with the force of a slap. "Love is not asking your daughter when she is going to catch up, as if her life is a failure. Love is not using one child to prop up the ego of the other." I leaned forward. "And Mom," I said, "love is not turning your daughter into a wallet." The table went deadly silent. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of other conversations seemed to fade away. We were in a bubble of tension so thick it felt physical. Elaine stopped crying. The tears dried up instantly, replaced by a look of genuine confusion and rising fear. She looked at Ron. Ron wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the envelope on the table. He had recognized the return address on the corner. It was the logo of the bank. Marin was looking at her hands, her knuckles white as she gripped the stem of her glass. "I don't know what you are talking about," Elaine said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. It was thin and brittle. "Wallet. That is a disgusting thing to say. We would never." "Don't," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I just held up a hand. "Don't insult my intelligence," I said. "And don't insult the law." "The law," Ron choked out. "Now hold on. Ruby, let's not start throwing words like that around. Whatever misunderstanding—" "It is not a misunderstanding," I said. "A misunderstanding is when you forget to return a text. A misunderstanding is when you arrive late to a party, when you use someone's social security number to open a line of credit without their permission. That is not a misunderstanding. Ron, that is a felony." The word hung there. Felony. Elaine's face went white. It wasn't the pale of elegant distress. It was the gray, pasty white of shock. She looked from me to Ron, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in her armor. She realized that I wasn't just being difficult. She realized I wasn't just being jealous. She realized I knew. "Ruby," Marin whispered. "Please." "Please what?" I asked, turning to her. "Please pretend I don't know. Please pay for your patio. Please let you steal my financial future because you wanted to impress people you don't even like." "I didn't," Marin started, but she couldn't finish. She couldn't say she didn't know. The lie would have choked her. "You didn't ask," I said. "You took the money, and you didn't ask where it came from because you didn't want to know. That makes you just as guilty." "Marin," I looked around the table. For years, I had been the one who was afraid. I was afraid of their judgment. I was afraid of their exclusion. I was afraid of not being enough. But as I looked at them now, Elaine terrified, Ron calculating, Marin crumbling, I realized the dynamic had flipped. The power in the room had shifted. It wasn't sitting at the head of the table anymore. It was sitting in front of me, inside a cream-colored envelope. They weren't silent because they were ignoring me. They were silent because they were terrified of me. "I didn't come here to argue," I said, my voice calm and final. "And I didn't come here to be gaslit about what love means. I came here to give you something." I reached out and placed my hand on the envelope. "This isn't a gift," I said. "It is an exit strategy." Elaine stared at the envelope as if it contained a bomb. In a way, it did. It contained the explosives that would demolish the facade she had spent 40 years building. "Open it," I said. "Ruby, don't do this," Ron said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "We can fix this. We can work something out. Family settles things internally." "You already tried to settle it internally," I said. "You settled it by stealing from me. That option is off the table." I pushed the envelope toward the center of the table, past the bread basket, past the wine glasses, right under the glow of the candlelight. "Open it," I commanded, "or I will leave right now, and the next person you hear from will be a detective." Elaine's hand trembled as she reached out. Her manicured fingers, usually so steady and precise, shook as she touched the paper. She looked at me one last time, searching for the daughter she could manipulate, the daughter who would fold. She didn't find her. That daughter had stayed home. The woman sitting across from her was someone else entirely. She tore the envelope open. The sound of ripping paper was the loudest thing in the world. Elaine pulled the papers out of the envelope. Her movements were stiff, like a marionette whose strings were being pulled too tight. She unfolded the timeline first. I watched her eyes scan the page. I saw the moment the comprehension hit her. It was a physical blow. Her shoulders slumped, and the color drained from her cheeks so completely that her blush looked like a bruise against her pale skin. "What is this?" she whispered. But she knew. She was looking at a transcript of a phone call made from her husband's phone, verifying a loan in her daughter's name. "It is the end of the line, Mom," I said. "I did not come here tonight to apologize for missing a party. I did not come here to be scolded about my lack of ambition. I came to terminate a business arrangement I never agreed to." Ron reached over and snatched the paper from Elaine's hand. He scanned it quickly, his jaw tightening. Then he let out a short, dismissive laugh. It was a terrible sound, forced and hollow. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Ruby," Ron said, tossing the paper back onto the table. "This is dramatic, even for you. It is a paperwork mix-up. I was moving some assets around to help your sister with liquidity. I might have used the wrong form. You are making it look like a conspiracy. Look at page 2. "Ron," I said. He froze. "Page 2, I repeated. "The verification log. The bank has a recording of a male voice confirming my date of birth and authorizing the disbursement of $14,000. The call came from the number ending in 8992. That is the phone in your pocket right now." Ron's mouth opened, but no words came out. The misunderstanding defense had just evaporated. "And page 3, I continued, pointing to the scanned document. "That is my signature. Or rather, it is a signature that someone practiced very carefully. It looks a lot like the way Marin writes her capital R's." All eyes turned to Marin. My sister was trembling now. She wasn't looking at the papers. She was looking at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and pleading. "I didn't sign it," Marin whispered. "No," I said. "You didn't hold the pen, but you knew." "I just needed the patio done," Marin stammered, tears spilling over her lashes. "Tyler lost his job in November. We lost everything. The severance package ran out 2 months ago. We were drowning. Ruby, and the party was the only way to keep up appearances. If people knew we were broke, Tyler would never get hired again. In his industry, perception is everything." "So you decided to use my credit score as a life raft," I said. "We were going to pay it back." Tyler spoke up for the first time. His voice was hoarse. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. I have an interview next week. A sure thing. We were going to pay off the line of credit before you ever noticed. It was just a bridge loan. Ruby, we just needed to get to the other side. You don't get to build a bridge out of my bones, I said. It is not that serious. Ron slammed his hand on the table, causing the silverware to jump. The diners at the next table turned to look, but Ron didn't care. The mask of the neutral, benevolent patriarch had fallen off completely. Underneath was a desperate, angry man who had been caught. You are family, Ron shouted. You have steady income. You have savings. You sit there in your little house with your perfect credit score, hoarding it, while your sister is fighting for her life. So I took the initiative. I did what a father does. I fixed it. And now you are going to sit here and threaten us with these pieces of paper. These pieces of paper are a police report, I said. The air left the table. Elaine made a sound like a wounded animal. No, she gasped. Ruby, no, you didn't. I did, I said. I filed the affidavit of identity theft this morning. The bank has already flagged the account as fraudulent. Their investigation team has the audio recording. They have the IP address, and they have the name of the suspect. You named me, Ron whispered. He looked like he was about to vomit. I didn't have to, I said. The evidence named you. When the bank investigators trace the phone number, they will find you. When they trace the IP address, they will find you. I just stepped out of the way and let the train hit the target. You have to stop it, Elaine begged. She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. Ruby, please, think about what this will do. Ron could lose his job. Marin could lose the house. The scandal, it would destroy us. Everyone will know. Everyone will know the truth, I said, pulling my hand away. Why are you doing this? Elaine cried. Is it because of what I said about catching up? I didn't mean it. Honey, I was just trying to motivate you. I am proud of you. I am so proud of you. You are the strong one. You can fix this. You can call the bank and tell them you authorized it. Tell them it was a verbal agreement. Please, just take the debt. We will pay you back. I swear. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had spent 34 years making me feel small so Marin could feel big. Even now, facing a felony charge. Her instinct was to ask me to absorb the impact. She wanted me to be the airbag for their crash. I am not the strong one, Mom, I said softly. I am just the one you didn't break, until now. Ruby, Marin sobbed. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I just wanted to win. I just wanted Mom to look at me the way she looks at her friends' kids. I needed the house to be perfect. Pressure does not give you the right to steal my identity, I said to Marin. And wanting to be admired is not a justification for fraud. I stood up. My legs felt solid. For the first time in my life, I felt taller than them. I wasn't looking up at a pedestal anymore. I was looking down at a ruin. From this moment on, I said, my voice clear and carrying over the quiet restaurant, I am no longer your financial safety net. I am no longer your emotional punching bag, and I am certainly not your victim. You can't just walk away, Ron snarled. We are your family. I am not walking away from my family, I said. I am walking away from a crime scene. I reached into my purse and pulled out a $20 bill. I placed it on the table next to the envelope. That is for my water, I said. I didn't order anything else. Ruby, wait. Elaine scrambled out of her chair. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was desperate, painful. Don't make this a big deal. We can fix it. Just don't leave us like this. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. Then I looked into her eyes. You made it a big deal. Mom, I said. You made it a big deal the moment you looked at my life, my happy, quiet, honest life, and asked me when I was going to catch up, as if I was behind, as if I was lacking. I gently peeled her fingers off my arm. I wasn't behind, I said. I was just running a different race, and I am done running in yours. I turned to Marin. She was head in hands. weeping silently. You can start over, Marin, I said. But you have to do it with your own name and your own money. The house is gone. The image is gone. But if you tell the truth, maybe you can keep yourself. But I will not pay the price for your lies anymore. Evan, I said. Evan stood up. He hadn't said a word the entire time. He didn't need to. His presence was the wall that kept them from surrounding me. He placed a hand on my back, warm and steady. We turned and walked away, behind us. I heard Elaine sobbing. I heard Ron cursing under his breath. I heard the waiter approaching their table, asking if everything was all right. I didn't look back. Walking out of that restaurant felt like walking out of a prison cell I hadn't realized I was in. The air outside was cool and crisp. The streetlights reflected in the puddles on the sidewalk. The city sounds traffic, distant sirens. People laughing sounded sharper, clearer. Are you okay? Evan asked as we reached the car. I took a deep breath. My chest felt light. The heavy weight I had carried since childhood, the weight of trying to be good enough, trying to be seen, trying to be loved by people who only loved reflections, was gone. I am, I said, and I realized it was true. I am free. I had lost a family that night, but as I looked at Evan and thought about my house in Westerville with the mint growing in the garden and the bills paid on time, I knew I hadn't really lost anything. I had just finally balanced the ledger. They had asked me to catch up. I finally had. I had caught up to the truth, and I had left them far behind. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Ruby's journey gave you a sense of satisfaction. Sometimes the best revenge isn't screaming. It is simply holding up a mirror and letting people see themselves. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from the busy streets of New York, a quiet room in London, or maybe somewhere sunny like Sydney? Please comment down below and let me know. I love reading about where our community is growing. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need a reminder that they are enough just as they are. See you in the next video.